So greetings and welcome back to the Dr. J vlog series. It is Sunday, February 1st, 2026. I hope you're managing the cold wherever you are. It's been brutally cold up here in southern Ontario the last week, but we should have some relief today. It's not going to get above the freezing temperature, but it'll be at least getting close for the first, or closer for the first time in at least a week. So we're on the third installment of our mini workshop on taking control of your mental health. So last week I discussed the importance of letting go of suffering, and in striving to let go, the importance of emptying or at least trying to declutter one's mind. I use the metaphor of the importance of daily cleansing of various kinds, like taking care of your teeth and not allowing the plaque to build up. Negative thoughts that take root in your mind are kind of the mental equivalents of plaque that corrodes your mental health. If you allow the mental plaque to continue to build up, then that's going to cause your mental health invariably to decay and lead to a kind of self-imposed form of pain and suffering. And that's where we pick up the story in today's session. So what are the specific and practical steps that you can take to start to clean and declutter your mind? And so the first step is perhaps the easiest of all, and yet ironically often meets with the most resistance, and that is to commit some time to just being by yourself. Again, ideally, I would recommend setting aside some time in the morning and then again in the evening to be completely alone. This is what I mentioned last week, without a computer, a cell phone, any other distractions of any kind. Just you in a peaceful or a calm place where you can sit upright, sit alone, and start the process of quieting your mind. So the next step then is what I want you to do is just to try to focus on your breathing. Ideally, you stop thinking, but don't think about not thinking because that's, again, you're actually going to be doing the thing that you're trying not to do. So instead, you just want to try to focus all of your attention on your breathing. Other thoughts may sneak in there from time to time as well, but try your best just to focus on the breathing. And you should be able to feel yourself inhaling, holding your breath for a moment or two, and then exhaling. But don't count the moments when you're holding your breath, because then that requires some cognitive processing, and we're trying to avoid that. So don't count or don't, impose some limit. Just essentially let it be whatever it's going to be, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay? And just experience and try to enjoy the breathing. It may sound simplistic, and in one sense it is, but remember, you're going to be breathing throughout the day, typically upwards of 20,000 times a day, sometimes even more, depending on your activity level and a variety of other factors, how much you sleep, etc. But how often do you actually stop and enjoy your breathing? If you're like most people, probably not very often, and perhaps almost never. And so, thank goodness that we don't really have to stop and think that much about it because, as you know, obviously our breathing is part of our autonomic nervous system, like our heart's beating and our digestion. And that means it just happens automatically, quite naturally. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to remind ourselves, oh, geez, it's been a few seconds. Maybe I should take another breath now. And thank goodness for that, right? We should be grateful. That relieves us of the burden of having to think about our bodily functions and operations. They just happen automatically year after year for most of us and quite naturally, right? And we live on. But the crucial point I'd like to stress, though, is the absence of thinking that's involved. Okay? We breathe. We don't have to think about breathing. And hopefully, I mean, if we're healthy, obviously we might have a lung condition or some kind of an affliction, and then we might struggle to breathe, right? And of course, all due respect, anybody who has some condition that requires assistance with the breathing, okay? So that's a whole other level of intervention. But most profoundly, what I'm saying here about breathing in general, and for most people, is that this allows us to capture in these moments the peace and the tranquility of just being alone with oneself and just being alone with one's breath. And we need to just learn how to be with ourselves and how to breathe naturally and calmly, to focus on our breathing and the being and the existing. and nothing more, ideally. So, and if you say, well, Dr. J, again, I don't have time for that. Or you've come up with some reason, some excuse to just not be able to focus and sit and focus on your breathing. In effect, what you're saying is you're confirming the diagnosis of your own mental issues or mental illness, or perhaps maybe just the equivalence of kind of a mild cold of your psyche. In other words, if you're unable, you've convinced yourself you cannot stop thinking or planning or worrying and so on, well, then that's part of the problem. And that's the point of actually forcing yourself to take some time to be alone. So yes, take the time at least once a day, preferably even more often, and find your quiet place to be able to settle down, and then engage in the process of starting to let go by focusing first and foremost on your breathing. Okay, let's do that for a few moments right now. Close your eyes, sit up straight, but focus on your breathing. Yes, you're going to still be hearing my voice, so it's not an optimal situation, but close your eyes and breathe slowly. Fully inhale through your nose. Hold for a moment or two, whatever's comfortable. Don't force it. And then exhale through your mouth. Again, inhale through the nose. And as I say, don't be counting or thinking about how long you have. Just try to do it as naturally as you can. Do it again. Inhale through the nose. And so on. Okay? So what you're trying to do is actually feel the whole process within your body, a process, again, that's happening, typically 12 to 20 times a minute, perhaps. But now you're taking the time to notice your breathing, feeling your breathing, and perhaps hearing the process at work as well. And if you're able to do that, fantastic. That's the first step, okay? Or the next step, I should say. And if not at first, if you're struggling with that and your mind is still filling up with thought, remind yourself it just takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of repetition, okay? And I want you to continually try to do that for a few minutes. Again, even if you're not very good at it at first, just keep repeating the process, trying to just focus on your breathing as best you can. And again, I'm not saying don't think of anything else. Rather, what I want you to do is try to focus all of your attention just on your breathing, on the calm, on the inhaling, the holding, and the exhaling. Okay? All right. And then, by the way, if you're able to do that down the road, I'm going to suggest that you also start to focus on your heart beating. Have you ever focused on your heart beating? Probably not. And you may think, well, how is that even possible? The heart it's too quiet. How could I even know if how often that's happening and so on? And yeah, the heart does beat quietly for most of us. It's protected, right? It's hidden behind the lungs and it's behind the sternum. It's kind of in its own little room, so to speak. But yes, you can even feel and hear your heart beating if you work at it. You can feel your pulse obviously on your wrist, or I prefer the carotid artery right up here on the neck, right? But what you find, and that's by the windpipe, if you will, and either side, doesn't really matter, whatever you're comfortable with. Use your index finger, middle finger, though, not your thumb, because that has a pulse too. It might confuse things, okay? But nonetheless, my point is that you can stay still and quiet, and you can actually identify the pulse of your heart and the rhythm of your heart beating. Again, it might take a little bit of practice. In my case, I can readily feel my heart beating while I'm sitting quietly, and then I can often hear the heart internally within my system as well. And you can too. And so why is that really cool? Because just as you can, to some degree, control your breathing patterns, slowing down your breathing deliberately, for example, slow down, take a deep breath, right? You've often heard that, command. You can actually control your heart beating to a degree as well. If I focus on my heart beating, I know that I can consciously start to actually lower my heartbeat or the blood flow, not magically, and I can't pretend to somehow avert a catastrophe like a heart attack or something, much more dramatic. But by just being quiet and focusing on my breathing and my heart, I can definitely exercise some control over that autonomic process as well, as can you with practice. And so why is all this important? Because there's really not much we can control in this world beyond ourselves, and for the most part, right? And we should be striving, generally speaking, to be able to let go, and certainly letting go of this notion that somehow we can control everything. But what can we control? What can we take charge over? First and foremost, our bodies. Again, not in every aspect, but basically our biological and our psychological systems. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. So let me give you a very simple example. If I haven't eaten vegetables all day, or I miss a day entirely, shouldn't do that, I can actually feel my body missing that kind of nourishment. Have you ever found yourself having a craving? I don't mean for your sweet tooth and that sort of thing, although you might have that as well. But I'll often actually say at dinner time to my wife, I'll say something like, honey, can we just focus on vegetables tonight, or create something with a heavy dose of vegetables more than anything else? Point being that the body knows what it's missing. Yours does, we all of our, if we listen and hear what the body's saying, we can actually kind of anticipate, we actually kind of know what it is that we're missing. And so back to the original point here of spending time alone, there are actually several reasons then to take this step of spending time alone. Okay, because you're actively trying, as I say, to disengage from the rest of the world, the demands, the noise, the distractions, etc. You're trying to let go of your thoughts and your worries, and then you're trying to redirect your attention instead to your breathing. And as I say, maybe even to your heartbeat. We'll come back to that another day. And then you're actually starting to listen to your body and getting a sense of how you're doing. And this is going to tell you a lot, too, then about your current mental state, right? So both your mental and your physical health can benefit from your self-diagnosis, from taking the time with yourself, okay? And not that that's all. There's much more to the process beyond this, but this, in my opinion, is the best place to really start. So if you do nothing else this week, okay, in terms of your decluttering and trying to reclaim your mental health and so on, try to take 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, perhaps in the evening as well, to number one, find some time to spend alone. To number two, sit quietly and without any phones and distractions, etc. Third, shift your focus entirely to your breathing and even your heartbeat if you choose. And then fourth, listen to your body, or at least what your lungs and perhaps your heart are trying to tell you. Try to slow these bodily functions down, or take some control over your breathing, and as I say, perhaps even your heart beating. And by doing this, you're learning about yourself somatically, but also how you can start to get your bodily functions under control, or at least back into alignment. Not because you're a control freak or have any illusions about everything else that's happening in the world. Quite the opposite. Rather, you're focusing on, if you're doing that, you're focusing on the countless aspects of your life that you can't control. And that's what's often creating the disturbances and the relative lack of health, physically, mentally, emotionally, and so on. So instead, you're learning to try to be in sync with your own body and what it's telling you. Just being, I'm thirsty right now. I know that I need water. I need fluid of some kind, preferably water, okay? And your body's giving you all kinds of signals all the time. But so often we're just too busy to actually listen to our bodies. So this is what we're trying to do. So this is, and then here's the intellectual payoff, if you will, for today's vlog, the third installment in our mini-series. Our breathing patterns and habits in general tell us a great deal about our body, about our minds, about our emotions. And we can use the practice of being mindful in our breathing to help achieve a healthier state of body and mind. Whether you know it or not, most of us will find that our breathing patterns are going to be changing throughout the day, sometimes in ways that might even actually reflect some kind of anxiety or distress. Some of the changes are quite natural and they're fine, as when, for example, we're exercising in a healthy way and our breath picks up. But quite often, our breathing patterns also sending us a signal that there's some kind of a problem. And thus, we can use the practices that I've just described here briefly and focus some loving attention then on our breathing, slowing down and breathing more fully, as an example, and then aim to restore balance and harmony in our lives. And then there are additional payoffs too, because if you practice this type of what we can call mindful breathing, and if you do that in the morning and the evening, say, or do it, periodically in your meditation or what have you, guess what? In time, you'll naturally start to focus more on your breathing throughout the day, and you can use that information to your advantage. Most commonly, you might find yourself breathing quickly, or have an elevated rate for a variety of reasons, like again, related to work, related to stress, related to exercise, etc., etc. But if you find yourself just in a restful state or a sedentary state, let me put it that way, and your respiratory rates exceed, say, 20 breaths per minute, then that's likely indicating a problem of some kind. It could be a panic attack. It could be a carbon dioxide poisoning, quite frankly. It could be some type of infection or disease or something even more serious, right? And so don't be stupid about yourself, as I was back in 2021, right? I knew I was having problems breathing, but I was kind of slow to self-diagnose. And in fact, I misdiagnosed. I thought, I need to start working out more. And then every time I tried to work out, I was getting short of breath and so on. And yeah, it was harder to diagnose then because it was COVID and people, the doctors weren't seeing us in person, etc. But I knew something was seriously wrong. And unfortunately, I waited too long to get the chest x-ray that had been prescribed for me, and then I suffered the pulmonary embolism that almost killed me, etc. So I won't go into that again. So if you see a problem in your breathing, and especially if it's acute, or chronic, it really doesn't matter, then I want to strongly urge you to get some kind of a diagnosis to figure out the source and then intervene accordingly. Again, if it's elevated just because of normal exercise, you walked quickly, for a couple of kilometers, whatever the case may be, well, that's normal. But I'm saying if you find yourself breathing more than 20 times a minute, again, it's easy enough to sort of clock yourself and monitor that, then see what's going on, right? And in most cases, we just, again, it'll be the odd period of stress and anxiety, not that big a deal, or fear or whatever, and that'll be manifested in our breathing. But again, that's where we can immediately work towards quieting our minds and focus specifically on, again, what we're calling mindful breathing, and then, like we've described today, and then that'll help. So to summarize, find a quiet place to be alone, eliminate external sources of distractions, sit up, sit tall, turn your attention toward your body, and observe your breathing. And at first, just take note of your breathing, okay? Don't make any changes. Don't make any judgments. Just practice this regularly, this kind of meditative practice of mindful breathing, and eventually you're going to begin to start to notice a relationship between your breath and your body and your state of mind. And that's what we're aiming to do, okay? And then you'll be able to integrate these mindful breathing practices into your everyday life, okay? So for example, and this is literally what I've been doing now for quite some time, when I arrive at work, I actually, not every day, but most days, what I'll do is I'll just typically sit in the car, because I do drive. I drop my wife off and then I go to work. But I'll sit in my car for a couple of minutes, sometimes with the engine running, especially when it's cold out. But again, I don't want that to distract me. And I'll just close my eyes, focus on my breathing, and do these practices that I've just described. And I'll empty my mind as much as possible. And then guess what? I walk in, usually feeling very good or much better or fresh and with an open mind, and then I'm ready to engage and to learn and to express myself more clearly, etc. So, okay, so that's the next step. All right, so next week we're going to then learn more about this self-consciousness, this mindful breathing, and then what we can do with the information that we acquire through the practice of mindful breathing, and then how we can start to integrate that into forging a healthier mind and body based on the feedback that we're getting, okay? And yes, there's actually a lot of really good science behind all of this, and so that's what will be the focus next week. In the meantime, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, dole out hugs in abundance, and may you take some time each day this week, okay? Set aside the time to engage in some mindful breathing. I'll see you soon.